but I just appreciate that you're there and able to step in and keep the momentum going, even though I wasn't there, and I can get off and have a nice break with Susie. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, guys. So today we're back to decision making. Let me just show you on my new little toy here. So this is what we're going to get through. This is the calendar as of now. So we are in week 33 of doing these webinars. So it's just been awesome to have conducted as many and to have, felt like we've created this little family here in the once a week getting together and helping people stay in stride and on track with being their best through what continues to be just a really challenging time. I mean, we're very fortunate in Australia. We've got our challenges in South Australia this week and in other ways as well. But when we compare what's going on in the rest of the world, we've really been very fortunate, but it continues to be a hell of a challenge for many countries and many people. So I think the value of these webinars of helping people just not only stay in stride, but to have a forum and a community that supports them through this type of situation just helps us stay with a positive perspective through, no matter what challenges us. Might not even be COVID, it might be something else, but it's just great to know that this support group is there. So we're in November, we're 18, 19, the public webinar. So this is the one we do each month. That's just a broad understanding. This is more me sort of teaching, but I try and do it in a way we're developing product from everyone's input as well. Today it's about decision making. 4 weeks ago we did one on decision making, and it was about how to make how do you make your best big decisions. We covered that, but we did it for the verify and authenticate drives, and today we're going to do it for the complete and improvise drives. Next week we do another masterclass session, and the masterclass, for those people that really want to dig deep into the ID, it's still another free webinar. But for those people, particularly those who are either a little more experienced or just have a real thirst and passion to understand themselves, and for that matter, the ID system even better. But this is where we put your particular stories and issues and challenges on the table. So we talk them through and help you with very direct coaching. It's not just me. I draw on the black belts in our group, and anyone really that has insight that they can share that could be helpful to each of you, then we share that in that class. And then the week after, early December, I have Mark Kaplan. So Mark is the founder and just, a wonderful entrepreneur and leader behind what's called Tribe Social Fitness, which happens to be the gym that I go to. But the reason I've asked Mark, and in fact, one of his colleagues to come along, is because he has built what I consider to be one of the most perfect models of business that I've ever seen. When we all sort of dream of having our own business and having this, firstly, a culture that you're proud of and that everyone who belongs to it, whether they be staff or customers, is proud to belong. And then you have retention of great staff and you have recurring revenue, and you can go away for several weeks and the whole thing keeps ticking, not just the revenue, but the culture and the brand as well. There's something he's done that's really special. And I've asked him to come along and talk about leadership, entrepreneurialism, and the culture that he's created. And I think, it's a gym with 1,000 members, so it's not a small gym. And many of us have been going for, I'm a founding member, I've been going for 10 years, almost 10 years. And there are a bunch of people that have been going for that length of time. So he's going to talk to us. And then we get back into our normal rhythm of a masterclass and another public webinar. And then we have a break for the Christmas break. And that will be several weeks. And then we'll start up again on January 20 and 21 with the public webinar first, just to warm everyone up. And then we have our next live interview with another entrepreneur, and this guy is incredible. His name is Treven Martinez. He established 15 years ago a company called Martinez Rail, for those of you who might want to check it out. And he has built it into just a behemoth of an organization. And I don't know how he's done it. I'm looking forward to finding out. It's something I'm super excited to do. I'm going to have like a preliminary interview with him in the next week or so, just to sort of start getting my head around what might be really valuable to cover. But I don't know how we're going to do that in an hour, but I think you'll find that really incredible. And of course, there'll be a lot of ID insights from that conversation as well. But his is also about vision, brand, culture, team, leadership. But he's built, as I say, a very significant business. all to do with, rail and a lot to do with mining infrastructure, which I think for you, Richard and Greg, you'll find really interesting as well. And he's young. I'm not going to disclose all of that just yet, but he's ridiculously young for what he's done. But I love Treven as well because of his family values, and they've just had their 6th child. So he's sort of conquering on all fronts. He's a hell of a guy. So I'm really excited about what we've got coming up over the next month, and we'll continue this momentum into 2021, of course. So let's kick off with today, our peak performance indicator. So for those of you who are new and maybe haven't had this experience yet, this is one slide that really sums up what the ID stands for, which is that green arrow that runs up the center of the page is when you are in stride. That's you at your absolute best, when you make your best decisions, when you are most fulfilled, when you give your best performance. Everything sort of has, like, the people often talk about being in flow or having the Midas touch or in the zone if you're an athlete. And then, of course, if you get pulled off to the left or off to the right, where you get distracted from being true to yourself and you're instead maybe trying to meet other people's needs and expectations, and you may well be meeting them, but it's more of a grind, and you pay a personal price. Not only do you miss out on being as fulfilled and having that same sense of achievement, but you also start to experience forms of stress or distress, which initially can be behavioral and emotional, like tempers and swearing and lethargy and so on. But eventually it starts to take a more chronic impact around your health and gets to the point where if you don't do something about it, you end up on either medication or something like that, or your body will break down in order to give you the message that you need to make a significant change. This slide to me sums up the essence of what ID is all about. It's not just understanding your strengths and how to operate to your strengths. It's about, this is you at your best. If you want to be the best version of yourself, then this is how you do it, no matter what's happening. So even when you go through, any form of crisis, really sick kids, marriage challenges, work changes, you can still do that in a way where you are at your best. As many people say, you can't control what happens to you, but you can, with more self-awareness, be more in control of how you react to and deal with those situations. So my question every week to you is to just take stock and think, what is your number, or where are you? For those of you who don't maybe like to think in terms of numbers, are you in stride or are you out of stride? And we often talk of a scale of 0 to 10, meaning are you somewhere up near the 8s, 9s and 10s and really flying and shining? Or are you more south of 5 and that's really a struggle? And if you can't put an exact number on it, you at least might have a sense of your direction. And I would just ask you to reflect, well, where are you today? And are you aware of what you could do to get really up to that 8, 9 and 10 level? If you want to, I had a client I was coaching just recently, and she said, Paul, I've heard you talk about this many times, but she was, for that particular day, she said, I'm a 9 today. And the difference in how I'm leading and the effect on my team, because she felt like she'd been at that place for several weeks. And she said, it's really true. The effect that, and her boss, she said, he can't be any higher than a 6. And she said to me, the impact that's having on me, that negative energy or the lack of positive energy, it's really draining. And yet she can see the effect of what she was having in terms of the shadow she was casting on other people. So my question to you is, what's your number and where are you? And does anyone have anything they'd like to share, and maybe about how they've gotten to where they are, whether that's up or down, in the last week or so? Anyone particularly high or particularly low? And not high, what you're thinking, Greg. No one's been to your backyard recently. What about a particularly low number? Anyone who's sort of saying, yeah, I'm being challenged right now?
Absolutely. I would say that just being to bring around your discussions about going to the gyms and such, not being able to do that, not getting that ability to just say, I need to go think something out and go work out at the gym or something, and means I feel unhealthy. I feel sometimes like I'm stuck. And absolutely, I feel like I don't, like my numbers have changed just this year. Like I'm a bit of a different person from all the external forces.
Wow, that's interesting, David. What number would you say you are?
I'd hate to hazard a guess at this, but it's definitely not my normal ability to just say that I can deal with things in a dynamic fashion and respond accordingly. I'd have to kind of relook and see what I feel like. I almost feel like my ID has changed in that respect, but I'll give it some thought. You're bringing up good thoughts
so
here.
You raise a great point, and I know actually Grant, who's got a similar ID to you on the call, you might see Grant there. I remember Grant saying a very similar thing when you weren't able. Grant's in Arizona, so in the US as well, and he wasn't able to get out to the gym. And I remember Grant, you talking about the impact that had on you, and how much better you felt when you could get back to the gym, right?
Yeah, Paul, it was like a release. I can certainly empathise. And reality is that, gyms in Arizona could be shut down tomorrow with how transmission rates are going. But it just had such a marked impact, and it made me realise very quickly how much physical health is linked to mental health.
Yeah. So I think, David, the fact you're aware of it is great, number one. And the second point, because when you're aware, we often say that awareness is 90% of the solution. Like just the fact that it's something that has shifted, and there are strategies, and we're happy to talk to you offline if you would prefer that, for how you can get back more in stride, notwithstanding the constraints that are there. But the point you raised that's also good is when you said you feel like your ID has changed. What's actually happening, and I think this is so cool, it's not the ID that's changed, it's the fact your ID is so rock solid that you feel the stress. If your ID could change and you could bounce with whatever the situation was, in terms of how you are wired, then you probably wouldn't feel as out of stride or, frustrated. So what happens is it's more that you're moving off of that green arrow, you're off to the left or off to the right. And it's that tension presents you as a different person. Like your behavior will change, your mindset will change because you're not as in stride. But when you come back to your true north, as it were, that's what really works. And for you, as a strong verifier, the more you can feel in stride, on top and in control of, making your list, getting on top of it, figuring out a solution, like put your problem solving instinct to work to figure out how can I exercise, how can I get whatever I was getting at that gym, whether it's exercise, whether it's friendship, whether it's accountability, how can I get that in an alternative way? And when you figure some of those things out, the problem solving side of your mind will give you a sense of fulfillment that you're making progress on that.
Thank you.
And that's assuming that the only issue is the gym. There might be other things as well to tackle. But
obviously, you can't just sit down with coworkers and bounce ideas off in person. Sometimes, as wonderful as Zoom is, we all feel that as well. So I know I'm not unique in that, but just finding a good friend who I would sit down and either have a drink or whatever else, and just say, hey, let's bounce through some of these ideas and have that discussion. I'm sure it's challenging for everyone, but thank you. Your feedback is very useful to think of. I'm not changing so much how I'm handling it. I just have to learn how to cope using the fact that my ID stays the same. It's interesting.
Yeah. And, keep in mind that particularly for a verifier, it's all about perspective. So we can all feel sort of somewhat the victim or, frustrated and so on. And then you meet somebody in a situation that is significantly worse and you sort of go, oh my God, I have nothing to complain about. And the minute you have that comparison, it completely shifts your mindset. So sometimes it can be helpful to just reflect, because that verifier will step back and think and reflect on, how are you fortunate? What, particularly now with Thanksgiving coming up, what is there to be grateful? Because the forces that are there around you will automatically pull you to a negative place. You can combat that by, very intentionally looking for the positive things that you've got to be not just grateful for, but where you can feel lucky and fortunate. And that changes your perspective and gets you back in stride as a verifier.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's good. Good.
Anybody else?
Yep, I've got one. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dylan. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm definitely on the low side as well, and I would say primarily kind of on the professional side, right? So you had the picture kind of with career, family, and all of that. Yeah. So for me, the thing that's kind of weighing me down is kind of what is the kind of next step for me in my career, right? So I've things have been going quite well, but I've been thinking about, okay, what's next, or how do I take the next step? I mean, how do I do something that is a lot more meaningful, things like that. And I haven't been able to get those answers. I've been searching for those answers, but I haven't been able to find them over the last 6 months or so, right? So I'm certainly not in stride on the professional side, not on the, but on the family side, thankfully things are fine.
Good on you. Good on you. Hey, Greg, he's one of your fellow tribe members as an authenticator. Do you have any recommendations for Dilip?
Yeah, I need to get him busy. Get fixed, go help, go do something. Just get out of your own head, get your eyes back in your head, look at others and go, how can I help some here? And the more you can help others, the less you'll focus on you, and life's going to improve like a rocket.
So focus on helping others, that's your recommendation?
Absolutely. As many little ways as you can, and then be useful to things, fix things. Doesn't have to be even at work. You can do it. Get your drawer that's sticking, sliding smoother.
And Greg, what about in terms of a clear picture? When I was hearing Dilip talk, I was thinking, okay, for the conundrum around career, it's like he can't maybe see where his future is in terms of having a clear picture. What would you recommend there?
Well, that's what I'm going with. He doesn't have that now, so he's got to go out there and do things and see things. And when he gets his eyes looking out at the world rather than that he doesn't have a picture, he's looking in. Start looking out. You're going to see pictures. You're going to know it. You're going to know it when you see it, but you won't see it by thinking about it. You got to get busy. That makes sense, Dilip?
Yes. So get busy, experiment with things, and it will lead to something that will put me in stride. Is that what you're saying, Greg?
Yeah, look, your energy changes even when you just say that. Look at that smile. You better get off this call and get to work, son.
Time to get busy. All right.
This is what I love about this grip. Like for all that I know about the ID, I wouldn't have put the same answer together the way Greg did as a fellow authenticator, not just one of our black belts and most experienced ID people, but as an authenticator himself. And those of you who are authenticators may well sort of go, oh my God, they were the exact words I would need to hear, or because it's like when you've got the same instinct, you almost speak the same language as someone else. And that's why it's so often valuable. And like, I'm a 1, so I knew that if I've got the benefit of someone like Greg sitting there that can help someone like Dilip, why wouldn't I draw on that? Because then the nuances are so as finessing it as they are, like that makes such a difference for how it lands then for people with that same style of ID, or even just that one drive, So I often draw on that, even if I'm doing a presentation or an email to somebody, if it's something I'm really wanting to be, bang on about, I'll run it past someone with a similar ID just to get the nuances of the keywords or the sequencing or something that, the presentation of it, so that it lands for that person. And it means you become much more audience focused. You're always thinking then about not just how is it going to land, but who is the person I'm talking to and how do they need to hear it or receive it so that it really resonates for them. And that to me is the power of having a community of people, their ID, like when you're working with people like this and you can sort of go, okay, who can I draw on? What a wonderful way or reason to be collaborative with somebody else. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Dilip. Great example.
Yeah, thank you, Greg and Paul. Yep.
All right, guys, I might move on to decision making because this is really the topic we want to get into today. If anyone does have anything they want to cover for themselves, please let us know offline. So in terms of the decision making, last time we were together, we covered verify and authenticate. Let me just show you those slides and you can see here what we've done. So verify and authenticate, these just to remind you some of the things that came up for those drives. We talked about this is how you make your best big decisions. So if you've got something really significant that you need to address, can you see that slide okay? You can't see it? You can, okay. Well, let me just quickly read them to you rather than take time. So for the verifiers, to quickly remind you, it was like make a list and weigh the pros and cons, and then even weigh up each of those items, put weights on them. Like the more specific you get, the easier it is to make that decision. What is the right, focusing on what is the right or decent thing to do, using key principles that you might have used for decisions before. For avoid verifies, these were great inputs, because it was like, reach out not just to collaborate with others, but to have something to react to. So if you are an avoid verifier and you bounce an issue around with somebody else, you can react to that. Trust your gut instinct or your sense of knowing. If the decision seems too hard to make, it's probably not meant to be made right now. Don't think that you have to make the decision. And the last one was observe how you would feel about it. Like, put yourself in the situation of made that decision, play it out, and see how you feel. And that sense of empathy of how you relate to it will guide you as to whether that was the right thing to do or not. For the authenticators, it was, in terms of making best big decisions, was make it as close to real as possible. So play it out and visualize it. You know, can you picture yourself doing it? If you can't picture yourself doing it and being in that situation, it's probably not meant to be for you right now. And then test it out, like road test it as soon as possible. The next one was what will work. Focus on what will work or be useful or most practical. And then for the avoid authenticators, it was trust your intuition, align it to your deeper values. And instead of worrying about what everyone else thinks, worry about what you think, because that's a big preoccupation for the avoid authenticators. So with that, I want to move on to the completers. And this is where I would ask those of you who are completers, meaning you have a strong drive, you know, 7s and 8s in that drive especially, think, okay, when I've got to make my biggest decision, or if I'm going to make a really big decision, how do I do that at my best? How have I done that? Are you aware of the formula for you that has really worked for you in the past? And I'd ask you just to share that with the group. Who would like to kick off the discussion?
Paul, Steve here. How are you?
Great, Steve. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you. I'll kick off. I'm a 7, so I wrap around 2 ideas. One is I move from big picture to detail, and a skill I've learned. But for big decisions, I apply this decision-making process in everything. But for big decisions, which I call as more complex, they have a greater impact. I will, from a visionary point of view, look at it long term. I'll be looking at, say, buying a car or a house or career changes. I will plan those out 12 months, 2 years into the future, and I'll just ponder about them and draw together bits and pieces of it. As compared to my wife, like I'm also a 2 on improvise, where my wife is a 7. So I don't share anything of those until a month or so before we need to make a decision, because she'll say, let's do it, where I don't. So, but no, preparation, just gathering information. But I also have learned in business, sometimes you have to make a decision and get on and move. You can't get all the information. So I've also learned to, at times, just to make a decision with 60% information and go with it, make a decision, feel the being uncomfortable and saying that's okay. Being uncomfortable is just because I have a need for completeness and needing the information. Sometimes you can't get it all, so make a decision and get going, which is sort of what Greg was saying before about just get busy. So I keep moving so I don't procrastinate, but recognize that I'm uncomfortable in that. If you make a decision, it's the wrong one, you just make another one, but you keep on going. So combining, grabbing information and just building a case, but then at times when you need to make a decision, make it and keep moving.
Excellent input. That's really helpful. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Cool.
Any other completers got something additional you would add?
So I posed the question, and I wasn't here last time, and so I feel like I'm a little bit short in the conversation. But is the complete category similar to being a perfectionist?
No. So how do we say your name? Is it just DU, or is there?
So first name is Day, all day long.
Day. Okay. Thanks, Day. So basically, we do see perfectionists, and they're typically people who are up in the first 3 drives. So if someone was like 7, 7, 7, 1, or 7, 6, 7, 2, like up, down, that is typically someone that we would see as a perfectionist. And by that I mean a perfectionist in almost everything they tackle. Everyone else can be can have traits of perfectionism on occasionally, like on the thing that they're focusing on, that's really critical, or that they're really passionate about in this moment. But when you are wired as up, 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 down, you tend to have that approach in everything you do, whether that be, you know, washing up, making the bed, a meeting, you know, a big decision, a little decision. There's that sense of perfectionism and mastery to it.
So then I'm actually 4, 7, 6, 3. So
Yeah.
where does that put me on the spectrum? Because I feel like I self-victimized myself in this whole perfectionism syndrome.
Maybe you do. There might be other sort of onion skins, like other layers to why you might do that. We wouldn't say that you're naturally wired to be a perfectionist. So if you are sort of being almost constrained by some of that, maybe offline, I could happily help you, Dave, with some ways to attack that. It should be a pretty quick fix, to be honest with you, because it's not your natural makeup to be like that. And if it's holding you back, I think we could break through that really quickly.
Really appreciate
maybe
it.
if you wish, in next week's masterclass, that could be something we put on the list and cover for you, because I think that could be of interest to the broader group. Out of respect for the group, I want to stay focused on the decision-making pieces today, because I know there are people who have been waiting to see this completed out, you know, given their IDs especially. So, but great question. We'll come back to that one.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. Anyone else on the adding to the complete drive from how you make your best big decisions?
Yes. This is short, Paul. Clarity is the number one thing for me. And so once I'm clear, then I'm good. So I do everything, thinking, researching, all that kind of thing to get to clarity. If
what does clarity mean for you, Judy?
I'm sorry?
What does clarity mean for you?
That I know that this is the right thing for me to go ahead with. And
Okay.
and I am in that process right now with a really big decision. And so that's why I was so eager for this session today.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Who else? So I'm going to throw some thoughts in just in case this helps. Oh, Christa, you're going to say something?
Yes, sorry, I was just trying to unmute. So Day, of course, has the perfect ID. I just thought I'd drop that in there as a fellow 4763. So it is hard for me to sort of detangle, I think, some of the complete from some of the avoid improvise when it comes to making decisions. But you know, definitely with the you know, my use complete, it's playing out the consequences, but then also having a you know, a plan B, and sometimes a plan C and a plan D, so that if I'm taking a decision where I haven't got sort of that 100% feel about it, but in terms of what Stephen was saying, it's something, you know, that it's time to move, it's time to make the decision. And then the things that I'm sort of still, you know, worried about or not 100% about, as long as I know what I would do if things play out, not in an ideal way, then, you know, that just gives me a greater level of comfort to be able to move a bit faster.
Thanks, Christa. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. I would add a couple of things, guys, that I have tested, you know, prepping for this call. One of them is the concept of legacy value. You know, when you look at where, and Steve sort of alluded to this before when he was saying, I look at things down the track, I play it out for the longer term. This concept of legacy is a big driver for completers. So when you think about whether it's raising children, the house you're buying, you know, like big decisions that you might be going through, think of when one day you're looking back and there's this concept of long-term legacy, impact, value. What do you want that to be? And does the decision today contribute to that, like add to it or detract from it? I think that's a very helpful decider for people who are driven to complete. Worst case scenario is, and Christa sort of half referred to this with the concept of having plan Bs and plan Cs and so on. But I find many completers will say, if I have a plan and can look at and handle the worst case scenario, that takes the discomfort because everything's unknown when you're making a decision, really, no matter how much you plan for it. But if you can handle that worst case scenario, that's a really big help. And the other one is start with small steps. I think often completers can be overwhelmed by how big the challenge can seem. But if you actually start with small steps, one of the things that's your strength as completers is the power of momentum. And when you start making progress, you actually get through it not linearly, but exponentially. That's the power of momentum. And so if you just get started, and Steve, you were referring to some of this in what you were sharing at the outset, but if you just get started, even though you may feel like you're only 60% there, as Steve was saying, with everything you need, you will figure the rest out. And as you gain momentum, you gain confidence, you make more progress, and eventually what seemed insurmountable or overwhelming initially, if you start with small steps, start with the things you can often finish and sort of tick off first, it will get there. And I'd say there are additional things that I've seen really work very consistently for other completers. I don't know if anyone here who is a completer wants to react to any of those.
Well, this is Andrea. Yes, I agree with that. The idea of just the easy wins first.
Yep.
So when I've got this as a completer, I need a deadline if it's a big thing, because I don't want to start if I can't get it finished. And so I have, a project sitting there staring at me, but I don't want to get started if I can't get it done all in one go. So to make progress, it's okay, I will sit down and I will do these things that I know are easy wins, and I will get those things done. And then, okay, at least I've made some progress. It's just knowing myself and managing that for myself has been the biggest help.
Well, and I just want to clarify something that you mentioned, Andrea. This concept about the quick wins, it's really interesting because completers will like quick wins because they're like early completions that build momentum and let you keep going to the next thing. And the avoid completes love quick wins as well, just because it's a quick win and they just need to keep their energy up. They just need to see little goals being achieved, constantly and quickly. So we can often use the same language and say we're both motivated by quick wins, for example, but the reason behind it, like that deeper motivation, is actually coming from a different place depending on whether you are complete or avoid complete.
Yes, that's an excellent point to bring up with my teammates who live heavily in the avoid complete.
Yeah. Okay, let's transition to the avoid complete drive and talk about what avoid completes need to make their best big decisions. Anyone have anything? We've got plenty of avoid completes on the call. How do you guys make your best big decisions?
Slowly after planning.
Oh, good.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying because of my idea. After I collect all the information and plan and look at all the options. Because you just said big decision, so I can't make an immediate snap decision. But yes, yeah. So,
well, of course, that's your verified drive. That one there, David. Collecting all the
course.
information, weighing it all up, and so on. That's right.
Yes. I don't have to tell you that.
That's right. What about some of you guys who are two incomplete? Trace, Greg, Pam, all you guys are really strong avoid complete. What's the essence of that for how you make your big decisions?
I can go. So I usually look at 3 to 5 options. I remind myself of what the options are. And also I look at it from a standpoint of what would limit my options or my freedom.
I think that last point, Pam, has come up a lot for me, is what gives you freedom and what constrains you, and you can feel that immediately almost when you use those words with yourself. You have this visceral reaction to like yes or no, if it's going to constrain you. But that which gives you freedom will always appeal to you more than that which constrains you in the case of the avoid complete drive.
So it's interesting for me. My first reaction was freedom, like what was just said is what gives me the most freedom. But Christa and I were talking about this the other day. I find my avoid complete actually makes it very difficult to make decisions. Like I feel like I make decisions from other parts of my ID. Like I make it from more my avoid verify or my authenticate or my improvise, because my 2 actually makes it so, like I live with a 2, my husband's a 2, and all we do is think about the options. It's actually so annoying because we'll just like, or we could do this, oh we could do that, or we could do this, oh we could go, and it's like seriously, it's dinner, right? Like just pull something out of the cupboard, oh we could go here, we could do that, and we could have the girls walk to, and it just is like option after option after option, and it actually becomes debilitating because there's like 300 options of what we could do. So I feel like my avoid complete actually, I don't know if anyone else feels like that, Greg, you're a 2, like makes my decision making so hard because there's so many options. So I feel like that actually, I don't know how to answer. I'd be curious what other avoid completes for decision making. I usually draw from the other drives because it's like so overwhelming how many options there are.
Don't you love Tracy? Absolutely. I was sitting here going like, what, huh? And I realized now the 2 just comes up with options. It's the 8 that makes my decisions. Is it going to work or not? I don't even waste my time. It's like asking a dog if he wants spaghetti, you know, like, no, just put it on the plate. He's going to eat it, you know?
Isn't it the drive to just react? So rather than thinking of it as making decisions, you just keep reacting. Even when you've made a decision anyway, it's only temporary, you know, like it's until the next option or the next crossroads comes, and then you'll react yet again.
Yeah, it's more like that. It's more like, I don't know if everyone's ever done rock hopping where you run along the beach, you just try and find the next one to stand on and without falling, and you go as fast as you can. And if you call that decision making, then yeah, then that's it's in the moment, it's right now, and okay, let's keep going.
And Greg and Tracy and Pam, is that even with really big decisions? I mean, if you're buying a house or moving locations, you know, in your case, Trace, moving from, you know, California to Hawaii, when you're making big decisions like that, is it still that rock hopping, you know?
Yeah, the way I describe it is like, and I always say to myself and clients would figure out, is like, what's the next step? What's the next step? Like my grandfather always taught us to, like, a path leads to a path, but you got to start walking first. And so I'm always just like, what's the next step? And then it'll open something else, and then it'll open something else. But like, I'm just thinking of like, what's the next step? And if I get caught in the long term, that's when I'm like paralyzed with decisions.
Yeah, I use the same phrase. What's next? You do these things in such a sequence that decision makes itself. Because if it isn't working, that you just change, and you change, and all of a sudden you go, oh, we got the house. So it's not beforehand, it's literally in the moment as you go. And then I call them choiceless decisions. They've sort of been made by action. God, never thought of it like that. Thanks, Trace.
Yeah, actually for me, I've developed a strategy around that. And what I would say is, what are my next 3 to 5 best choices? I limit it to 3 to 5, and usually it's 3. So I just look, I've just developed that strategy, and usually then I'll go default to my verify drive, which I'm just a 6, but my verify drive, then I could start saying, well, could I do without this and keep that? What's the thing that I could actually give up or the things that I wouldn't give up? So there's a little bit of a process there, but for me, it starts with what's the 3 top choices, 3 to 5. And I actually really don't struggle with making decisions.
Yeah, it could be. This could be as subtle as having the difference of you being a 6 in verify, Pam, compared to Greg and Tracy. That might be the difference, that you can at least sort of rationalize that aspect of it, as opposed to it coming more from gut. Because we're not one drive. We are all our whole ID. We're breaking it down here just to help try and keep it simple for people to learn. But really, we all come to the table with all 4 numbers in play, you know. So that what you mentioned there could be a really subtle difference. I do think this piece around freedom and constraint is huge, though, for this drive, because when I think about people who've made decisions, particularly to get out of roles or relationships or into them, so often there's something about freedom and constraint, what is going to open up or what it's going to constrain has been a big catalyst to them making that decision.
Yeah, I
Or
would
making a decision. Sorry, Trace.
I think that's huge. I think even my decision to come here, right, was like, okay, what's going to give us the most freedom and opportunity? Like, what's going to be the most different and fun? Like, how do we make it not constrained? And I felt so constrained where I was. So yeah. That was a big part of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I add in? 99% of the time, my need to make decisions is actually easily fixed because the intuition comes in. I go, oh yeah, that's what I've got to do. The problem comes when I can't, the intuition isn't telling me what to do. And so I'm going round and round and round and round and round and round in circles because I cannot make that decision. And now I just go, well, that's the wrong thing. Forget about it, do something else. But of course, that's the other drives kicking in as well. But for me, if the other drives don't kick in, it really making a decision, looking at that too can be so difficult.
And maybe that's the point, Gail, when we talked about the avoid, authenticate drive, when you start adding these together, if you're not getting intuition on something, maybe it's not meant to be decided right now.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, guys, let's move on to the improvised drive. So let's talk about those of you driven to improvise and you've got a big decision to make. What's your best way? What do you use to make that decision so that you make your best decision on the biggest items?
Well, I think it's a bit of a scary question for me because it's always been give it a go, see what happens, and it's obviously that's I think related to the 2 incomplete as well. But 9 and improvise, it's just what looks good. The freedom is big for me too. And give it a go. What will impress? I think, and that's also almost a vulnerability. What will impress others as opposed to what will work. And that's interesting for Greg to see that because obviously I'm a fairly resistant authenticator as well. I think freedom is a big choice, but give it a go, see what happens. Don't let's contemplate or think about this too much. Just let's give it a go and see if it works.
Yeah, impact and impression is big, Mike, and it can be what will impress others, and that's a combination with the avoid, authenticate. But I think so often it's what will impress yourself. You know, like it's about the energy you will feel from something as well. So absolutely. Impression, you know, what will impress has this connotation of it of, you know, impressing others like egotistically. But I think there's a very personal and healthy motive around that as well, where it's like, what will boost you? You know, what will give you more energy? What will impress you? I certainly relate to that at times in terms of the effect something will have on me. You know, if I was dressing something up or you know, whatever I was preparing, it could be a table, having friends over for a meal. It's not really about them walking in and being impressed by how we've set the table. It's more me, you know, getting my energy right. It impresses me. So that concept of impression is big, and that's not for a big decision necessarily, but this impression piece. I think it is true for particularly strong improvisers that impact, this wow factor, you know, the sense of wow, like, whoa, what's going to have that biggest impact? That's a huge part for improvisers, for sure.
It's interesting. Yeah. I relate to it's interesting. The impact for me kind of feels different, which for me is opportunity. Like, what's the greatest opportunity here? Like, so it's not as much as how others are perceiving me. I don't care, but like, what opportunity is this going to create? What is this going to make happen? Like, what is this? It's very much an opportunistic, like, where's the opportunity here?
Yeah.
For smaller decisions, it's actually, I was thinking about the other one that comes up for me a lot is like, what's the easiest path of least resistance, simplest option here? So that's not as much for big decisions, but for small decisions, how I make daily decisions is like, what's easiest, what's simplest, what's path of least resistance. So big decisions is opportunity, and smaller decisions typically seems to be what's easiest.
Thanks, Trace. I love the finesse you bring to this. Beautiful. Thank you.
Paul, it's Susan here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you.
Can hear you. Yeah, sorry, I just got the bug.
Yeah, you're frozen. Okay, while Susan's coming back, anyone else got something they want to share for improvise?
Hi, Paul, it's David here.
Hey,
Paul, I think the other thing that I go for is something that's sustainable, so that if I do it once and if I do it properly, it's self-perpetuating. It's something that people can build on again and again, not something that I necessarily have to keep on doing every day, if that makes any sense. So I guess it's partly the wow, the impact, how it's going to help other people, but also, I guess it all fits in together.
Yeah, I can see almost your whole idea at work there for that sustainability piece, David. I don't think it's just to do with the improvised drive. It's probably almost the perfect word for the combination of your 4 drives,
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Susan, are you back? You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, okay. So I was actually just rabbiting onto myself then. So yeah, I was just going to say that I just usually work out what is it I actually want, and I just go for it and just dare myself in a sense, and that's exciting for me. And then I just see what's possible, and then I look at what like the Avoid Complete is more about, what's the best options. And then I'll just pick out the best option out of it and then just work like crazy to make it happen. But and I've had a few examples where that's actually worked. So yeah, that's how I do it.
Thank you. Where does hope fit in for improvise? Because when I think about people who've made big decisions around particularly relationships, where they've got out or in, it's had a lot to do with hope. And I wonder, for those of you who are 8s and 9s in that drive, or 70s like you, David, like, where does hope, what sort of driver is that for you in making your big decisions?
All for me, it would be big. And I think a phrase I got acquainted with many years ago was brightness of future. Being able to see what the future holds and envisioning how that would excite me. So I think brightness of future has been something that's helped me, and I think others too, in using that phrase. But excitement and freedom is key too.
Beautiful. Yeah, thanks, Mike. I love the simplicity, of course, of that. Beautiful.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think that word simplicity, I often say, though, that the simplicity that I desire often becomes complexity, because we bring so much into our life because everything's possible. So simplicity can easily turn into complexity, which is a bit of a vulnerability as well.
Yeah.
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 I find that I make the decision and I do it really quickly. And then I'm halfway through execution and I realize there's a better decision. So I move on to that. So actually ending up with what I was expecting when I started is often not where I am, but I'm really happy where I am anyway, so it doesn't matter. I assume that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, we come to know you well. It makes sense for you perfectly, Gail. All right, let's move on to go, Trace.
I was just very quickly, my version of hope, like I relate to hope and having hope, but it doesn't relate to decision making. My version of it, I think, is it's like when you said that is energetic, is like a positive energy is like what it is. My version of hope is like, does that feel like it's going to bring positivity, or like, but it's an energetic piece as opposed to a logical thing. Is like, is that bringing positivity into our lives or my life or their lives or what?
Beautiful.
This situation.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, guys, for the avoid improvisers, let's talk about decision making. And I'll kick it off here to just say, I think every decision is huge for avoid improvisers. There's no such thing as a big or a small decision, because every decision is taken so seriously. So decision making for avoid improvisers is a big deal. And I think it's sometimes very frustrating when they see others who are different to them, particularly improvisers who just seem to make decisions willy-nilly, like just, yep, go with it. And they're not giving the, there's what's the word? There's not the reflection. They're the consideration. They don't seem to be stressed about it. They just do it. It's like they're not as committed, and therefore it often adds pressure because you feel like the only person holding responsibility. So it's a big deal for this ID. So amongst all that, how do you make big decisions and do them at your best?
Paul and Ian, one of the things I was just going to throw in there as well, another big part of this is obligation in decision making.
Yep.
And you know, if there's an obligation, you sort of, when you're weighing up risks, it's like if you've committed to something and you're in, that will force you into the decision. So you've obligated, so you obviously assess the risk and made the decision, but now that you have an obligation that you've committed yourself to, and once you have that, you have to deliver. I have to do it, whatever that obligation is. And I find for myself sometimes, having made that, you know, you feel obligated to someone, and then you sort of might reassess the decision. And this is obviously my whole ID playing out. Very hard to then backtrack or get out of it. How do I get out of it? But that obligation is huge.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Ian.
Ian and Steve here. Yeah, that's very interesting, that obligation, but even the obligation to yourself, where you be able to go to bed at night and say, yes, I've done what I said I was going to do just for yourself rather than for others, is a very interesting concept. So that I'm a 2 on the avoid improvise, Paul, and vision, as you mentioned before, and purpose, extremely valuable for me. So things that come out of left field really screw me up big time and I get annoyed. So therefore, understanding that, I've then moved into something Tracy shared with me about a 40-70 rule from Colin Powell. I keep on making those decisions and keep moving, but I've learned something to back myself and live my life by my design rather than by default. And default, I mean, was just allowing things to happen. But it's and increasing my capacity to live with uncertainty, and knowing that might feel uncomfortable, but where I'm living my life in design and the vision I have, it's like something Craig said a couple of weeks ago, that you dial in your own pain and your own level of uncertainty to achieve those things you want to achieve in life. So therefore, I've learned to back myself, make the decisions, keep options rather than plans A, B, or C. And if option one goes pear-shaped, we'll go to your next decision, but keep it moving. So, because I'm a 2, so therefore, run the risk of doing major risk analysis and all that sort of stuff. And too often, life will pass you by, and you go, "Man, I just was too slow." And so I don't want that to happen. I want to fulfill what I want in life. So back myself, live with the uncertainty, and keep in tune with my vision and purpose of what I want to do.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Thank you. Hey, Amanda, you're a 1 in improvise. I think we'd all like to hear from you. How do you make decisions, and what does decision making, what is it for you? Is it a huge thing? Is it a scary thing? Have you found a way to deal with it really in stride? We'd love to hear what you've got to share.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, it's part of my everyday life, and yeah, every decision. First, I work through it in my head, but when it comes to big decisions, I think what I really need is time on my own. So, and even if it's smaller decisions, or during my day-to-day, if I have to make a decision, even if I can just take a 10 minutes break and go for a walk around the block on my own and work through everything in my head, and I'll come back to it and I'm like, okay, I've got it, let's do it. So, and I don't really know which of my drives play in there in terms of verify and complete, but thinking just avoid improvise, I would say, yeah, time on my own is really, really important to commit.
Totally. I wouldn't have thought to say that, Amanda, but solitude is what it does to your energy. It's not just that it's away from all the noise and distraction. It allows everything to then just settle, and the busyness and the noise of all of that hype disappears, and it allows your mind to take the pressure away to make that decision. A bit like when someone's in a job interview and you're trying to come up with all the answers really quickly because you feel under pressure and your mind just freezes. Solitude is the opposite to that. And when you take that pressure away through solitude, it frees all the all the wheels up inside to then work properly and make their decision.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hey, Paul. I would say it has been a big issue for me in my life, and some of it has been, you know, my strategy has been purposefully avoiding situations where I have to make big decisions, and that's been it's a choice that I've made. It's a choice that I've made. You know, in various respects, but it works for me, and it works for me because I found a niche, you know, that that works. But because I know it's so stressful, but I also know there are things I kind of missed out on, you know, for that very reason. But I think one of the biggest things, when in particular I think of big decisions I've made in my, you know, life and more in my personal life, it's always been this thing about, you know, what's the biggest risk. So, you know, what's the biggest risk about not doing something? And so even if it's still scary, I don't have all the certainty, but, you know, the other side just tells me, oh, you know, that the thing that I could really miss out on, or the impact that it could have, you know, on my, you know, mental health, and not doing something I really want to do or whatever, that's been my sort of guiding light. You know, what's the biggest risk here of not taking a decision right now?
So you've raised a great point. I had it here to raise myself, Christa, was this concept of changing the, like someone said before about assessing risk. And then there's changing the way you look at risk. You know, like there's the risk of making the decision, but I think some of the people I've found become really good at decision making who are avoid improvise. They also focus on the risk of not making the decision, you know, and not just the risk that might be like a financial risk, but what about the risk of their brand, particularly when you're in a leadership role? Like if you're sitting in a meeting and you're not speaking up because of the risk of making a fool of yourself, of the risk of embarrassing yourself, of the risk of being seen as, you know, or being misinterpreted. There's also the risk that people will feel like you're just taking from the team and not contributing. They might feel like you're disengaged. You run the risk of them feeling like you're, you know, not a giver, you know, and not contributing, or you're not seen as being senior and strategic or a valuable contributor. So there are lots of other risks other than just the risk that you might see in front of you. And I think when avoid improvise people then focus on some of those other risks, they can be actually significantly bigger. And I know of people who have ended up doing things that still feel uncomfortable. It's not that they, you know, are at total peace. Like Steve said before, you can still be uncomfortable, but the risk of not doing it would be significantly worse. And so you take the lesser of the two evils, as it were. But that, I think just even knowing yourself as an avoid improviser, know that, okay, so with these types of decisions and anything new, like I'm always going to feel uncomfortable. So I've just got to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable and just get on and do it. And as you start to have more success doing that and see that a lot of the things that you perceived as risks are mythical anyway, I think that builds your confidence that you can still shine in those situations and get better at doing that, you know, just get better and more comfortable with being more agile with decision making. Fear is a big driver. It's another sort of, you know, a synonym almost for risk. Being risk averse is that you're driven a lot of times by fear, whereas improvisers are driven by the possibilities and the opportunities of things. The fear is often a driver for the avoid improvise. And I think it's really, really important then to unpack that concept of fear and say, well, what am I fearing? And what's the risk of not doing that? You know, because so much of fear is just perception in your own mind. Rather than
actually, Paul, on that's a really good point. That there's an old saying that the fear you feel, the feeling is real, but what you're fearing is not. Look at that. So you trust the fear, the feeling, that's really real. But what you think is the thing you're fearing probably isn't. And the more you unpack it, the more you can clarify it.
I love that. I love that, Greg. I think that's such a helpful thing to give avoid improvise, who can then, they don't have to dismiss everything. They can hold on to the feeling and know that that part's real, but not what's behind it. What a great clue. Thank you. Yeah, really good tool to use.
While I've
Sorry.
got you, I want to just do a real quick, Commander, just a real congratulations to Susan Engel, because she got her book released just recently, and she can talk about it later, but I'm so proud of her. So that's all.
Good on you, Greg, and congratulations, Susan. That's fantastic. What's the book called?
It's called Get Into Your True Comfort Zone.
Okay, well, people can check it out online.
Not yet. No, I've got it on my website.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm going to launch it probably around March next year. So
Okay.
it is released.
Lovely.
If people want to.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, congratulations.
Thank
All right,
you.
guys, that brings us to the close.
Wait, I interrupted Amanda. Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry, now I was just gonna say a strategy that I've learned being avoid improviser in high on complete when talking to improvisers and avoid completers is just make sure we're on the same page in terms of, okay, is this just brainstorming and we're just talking things out loud? Because I find that avoid improvisers and completers will think through things in their head, and if we say it out loud, it's like we're committing to doing something, whereas improvisers are just talking and weighing their options and going back and forth. So we fear that if we say something, then we're committing to that. So, say if I'm having a conversation with my husband, I'm like, okay, are we on the brainstorm stage, or are we actually gonna do something? And then that kind of releases the pressure from me to say what I really think and do that process with someone or in a meeting or something like that, without the fear of, okay, I said that, so now I have to do it. So that's just, yeah.
so good. So good. I'm certainly glad we didn't miss that. Thanks for sharing that, Amanda. Thanks for calling it, Greg. Great input. What a great way to finish too. Thanks for joining today, everyone. Hopefully we'll see you again next week. This has been great insight. I'll publish that. I'll put that slide together, the matrix, to show all of those points we've just covered, and I'll get that up onto our site before the end of the week. So you'll see that there, and we'll send it out in an email for you as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Take care.
Oh, see you, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you all.